I'm really excited about today's conversation with Eric. Eric is a CTO at DrLisa.ai, where he helps clients with their AI strategy and solutions. Eric has been doing some fascinating work behind the scenes with AI. I can say that because I get to collaborate with him closely. So today, I asked Eric to share his approach to solving these business problems with AI so that we all can learn from him. Eric, welcome.
Thank you, 𝘀😂🐂. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Well, I have to say, I love that you're always writing candid feedback on research papers and LinkedIn posts. Personally, it really helps keep me grounded on what's hype versus what's real and how to really think about the AI space. So I'm curious, can you share a little bit about what informs some of your thought process when you're looking at AI as a business solution?
By trade, I'm a software developer, and most of my professional software development was back-end Java. So that's the bias I bring to the table, which means that I have these sort of old school developer concepts of what the process of building software should look like. When generative AI became a major force in the business world, not just the technical world, my approach to understanding it was to study the mathematics first. So I did statistics as a sub-major in college. So that's a pretty good grounding for the type of math that you need to study to understand what a large language model is doing. But it's not all. So there were lots of branches of mathematics that I needed to either study from scratch or brush up on very seriously. Then I also have a consulting background, which trained me on how to absorb an understanding from a client about what their business problem is. So I was trained how to ask questions, how to listen for answers, how to ask follow-up questions, how to test what you think you heard and make sure that you actually are now aligned with the client in your understanding. So they're the basic building blocks of my background and what informs my approach to AI.
Makes sense. Statistics, mathematics, consulting, it all teaches us to ground in some kind of ground truth. So makes sense that you approach things that way. So Eric, let's get into something fun. Tell us about an interesting problem you're working on right now.
Yeah, so there's one client that has a very interesting requirement that requires a little bit of data science to solve. And essentially, I can't go too much into the details. I can't name the client, but this is, imagine if you had a business equivalent of a dating website where you had people that you wanted to match up, and it can get quite complicated because people are complicated. So you can't just say you're the minimum height and that person likes that height and you have the same color hair as their last partner, and so that should work. It gets a lot more complicated than that. And data science does have some tools for examining how to do this kind of matching, even when it becomes complicated. So I took my own basic theory of what this probably was like. So when they described the problem to me, I thought this sounds like graph theory might be applicable, but it had been a while since I'd actually done anything with graph theory. So I took that to one of my favorite chatbots for this kind of subject matter, which is 𝑢.com. So the two chatbots that I trust the most with mathematics, AI, STEM in general, 𝑢.com and Perplexity. Both of those chatbots then use a variety of different underlying LLMs. Basically, I use 𝑢.com to test my own hypothesis about whether my idea of using graph theory would work on this business problem. So in a conversation with 𝑢.com, it was able to clarify probably the best approach, data science-wise. And then I used a Claude model to come up with Python code that implemented that data science. Why Claude models? Because they're basically good at Python. So that handled the back-end data science part of it. Then I also needed to show this client a user interface that essentially synthesized the work of several agents that were going to be working in the background. This client, by the way, doesn't care whether it's one agent, 10 agents. They couldn't care less. They just want their problem solved, and they want a user interface that makes the human interaction with their system easy and clear.
Makes sense.
So they're not particularly interested in what agentic tech I'm using, whether I'm using LangGraph or whatever. They couldn't care less. What I needed to do for them is show them the user experience. I used Lovable to prototype the user interface. I think that for prototyping user interfaces, Lovable, Replit, Bolt, they're all good tools. I happen to prefer Lovable. So I used that, and as that generates TypeScript code, which is a perfectly good language for handing off to someone like, I'm not a JavaScript developer, I'm not a TypeScript developer. So that lets me give this code to someone who is and say, look, this is a prototype of the user interface that I would like to build, but now I need you to apply your 10 to 15 years of JavaScript development and TypeScript knowledge to make sure that this code is performant and secure. The two things, I know that Lovable makes an effort to make its code performant and secure, and it even has a new function now where it does a security review of your code. But for me personally, being the old school developer that I am, I prefer to run that by another human developer that specializes in that language at an enterprise scale, so they understand that if you have 4,000 simultaneous users all running sessions on this thing, you need it to behave like this.
So what I'm hearing from you, Eric, is that because the problem that you are solving is highly data-driven and statistical in nature, you started with the backend first, right? You started with vetting what is the best way to statistically solve this problem. And then once you validated that, that's when you focused on how this translates into a user interface where the user can interact with this agent, which is so different from the process I've been hearing from other people where they're typically starting with front end first to conceptualize an idea, and then they think about the back end. So I'm curious, how has the client been engaged in this process?
So when I worked on the first iterations of the back end, the Python code, it would basically be able to run on a section of their real database. So I asked them to create a little extract for me. I don't need your whole database. That's enormous. Just create a little extract for me, and I'm going to run this code on the data, and I'm going to show you the results. And then I'm going to ask you, do these results look intelligent to you? So they, as business experts, could see the matches being made, and they could say, oh yeah, that one makes sense. Oh, this one is strange. What is this? And so I let them interrogate me on how the matches came about. I also basically gave them a description of each of the top 50 matches that it came up with. So I basically just made sure that the sample sizes were representative all along. So first of all, they give me a representative sample of their database. Then I give them a representative sample of matches. And so the statistics are all, they work at each step. So the first thing that I needed them to do was to validate that the data science was producing things that they as business people thought were sensible. Then the second thing on a parallel track was showing them the UI, saying, okay, now that you have some faith that the actual data science will produce a solution that works for your business problem, let's talk about how you want to interact with this system. And that's when I showed them the prototype I built in Lovable. And as you know, the really good thing about Lovable is that the feedback loop between them telling you, like, I like that, but I don't like this. I like this, but I don't like that. It's way better to show them that on a screen than show them, I don't know, some wireframe or try to describe it in words. It's just better to show them a working prototype. And then changing a prototype in Lovable is very, very quick and easy.
Well, it also aligns with our fundamental principle, which is show, not tell. So
yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you practiced one of the fundamental principles at DrLisa.ai. You, of course, was constantly iterating and vetting the idea, but what are some other considerations you're thinking about as you start to branch out of prototyping and really building something that you can productionalize and hand over to the customer?
Yeah. So the first place my mind goes for stress testing the solution is performance and security of the backend code. I don't know what the simultaneous user load on this system is going to be in real life, but I have to build it for a high simultaneous user load. And all of the LLMs that generate code are getting better at those, but I still believe that a human expert coder can still spot errors faster and better than LLMs at the moment. Maybe that'll be different in 2 years' time.
So you're thinking about data security, you're thinking about the stability of the code for production purposes.
Yep.
You're also thinking about obviously hosting, right? As far
Yep.
as how
Yep.
this is going to be extended to
Cloud
the
security,
client,
yep.
and then provisioning. So yeah, lots to consider. But it still sounds like that you got a good chunk of the work done through prototyping. And the best thing is that you have client validation. If you compare and contrast that with the traditional way of software development, yeah, sprints helped. You could demo something at the end of 2 weeks, but you would still lose 2 weeks. And there was a lot that was already built,
Oh,
a lot
absolutely.
of time and effort that was already spent across an entire team of 7 to 8 Scrum team members before you could put something in front of the customer, your stakeholders, to get validation. If you have to put a number, a ballpark, how far do you think you are with what you've built to what is pending before you can deliver it to the client?
70 to 80%. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
And so that first 70 to 80% goes a lot faster than if you did not have AI tools. For me, AI means speed through the first 0 to 80% of your workflow.
And you have client validation and client confidence.
Right. Yes, because client input, client validation has to be part of that workflow.
That makes sense. This was all very helpful. Any recommendations on a good podcast or any newsletter to read around AI for people who are curious to learn and go deeper in the space?
There are so many. I think what would be credible recommending is understand the underlying math of AI. And one YouTube channel that I really like for that is something called 3 Blue, 1 Brown. That has a course on neural networks that walks you through the mathematics of neural networking. And I think that if you are new to generative AI and you want to understand how it works, if you're a developer, for example, you probably should know this.
Yeah, I found it very useful back when you had shared it with me. Maybe I can drop a link to those series when I publish this as well.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, that was such a valuable deep dive, Eric. Thank you so much for sharing your process and your insights. Lots to learn. And I love that I get to learn from you firsthand every day.
I learned from you too. I mean, this is a two-way learning thing.
That's what great collaboration is all about. Thank you so much for your time, Eric.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.